Okay, here we are. I'm Amanda Neely. Joining me is Mark Willis. We were planning to go live on Mark's page, but we had a last minute change of plans. So we're here on Grandma's Wealth Wisdom. And then Mark's going to share over at Lake Growth Financial Services. And he's also host of the Not Your Average Financial podcast. So be sure, in addition to listening to Grandma's Wealth Wisdom, you're listening to his podcast too. And Mark's going to kind of run the show here. I'll let him share more about who he is, what we're talking about today, and we'll just have a fun conversation.
Awesome. Hey, Amanda, great to see you.
Good to see you too.
Happy to see you on a Friday.
Yeah.
And the world did not totally end like we all expected it might at this point. So cool.
Yeah.
So this is Facebook Live, huh? It feels feels comfortable. Kind of getting my skin in. It's fun. So our question down here, guys, is who do you want to be when this crisis is over? And that's been a question that's been rumbling around in my brain since this all started. I have a belief that we will survive. I have a belief that we will all make it through this. And so for me, the next logical question is, who will we be after we make it through this? You know, if you've ever seen those zombie shows, The Survivors, I mean, everyone who didn't survive weren't around to really think much about it, right? But everyone who did survive, who did they become? I feel like that's a good question. And I feel like I heard it once said that like those zombie movies, it was actually the guy who made Dawn of the Dead. He said that zombies were just the cinematic element to focus on the human story. They were just the cinematic muse to get us to think more about the kind of people we would become after the world came to an end. So whether it's zombies or a virus that you can't see, the question is, for me, is what kind of person will you be after you make it through this? So Amanda, give me some feedback just on the question. What do you think about that question?
Yeah, as not a watcher of zombie movies, I can remember the last zombie movie I watched. It was really interesting to hear you say that because I don't think I've ever thought about zombie movies that way. My favorite meme that I've been seeing out there recently, you see like these dinosaurs and like a big fireball in the sky, and then a speech bubble from one of the dinosaurs saying, "What's going to happen to the economy?"
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
And of course, like the dinosaurs don't survive that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But also that puts in perspective, like if we are, well, and that kind of actually brings me to a question I have for you. If we're focused just on surviving this crisis, who do we think we are to ask a question like, who do you want to be when this crisis is over? Isn't it just enough to just get through the crisis and survive?
Yeah, I suppose. But what are we surviving for? And so why survive? Why did we survive before the crisis started? If it was just enough to make it to the end of the day, that's okay. And sometimes you got to be worried about your very next breath. But it's okay to think long range, even in the midst of crisis. In fact, I have a feeling that our grandparents thought back on how they treated each other in the midst of the Great Depression, or great-grandparents or whatever. And I know with Grandma's Wealth Wisdom, that's what you guys focus on, or like, what would Grandma do? And that'd be a sweet bracelet, I guess, to have. But what kind of people made it through the Depression? Were they better off? Were they worse off? I've thought a lot about, all the kind of unintended consequences of this crisis. Thinking about, I saw a picture of like on a news outlet, I saw a picture of what church is going to look like this Easter for Catholics. Let's see if I can pull it up here. So yeah, this is something I think I probably wished could have happened back when I was a kid, to skip church. Yeah. I don't know if you can see that.
Yep.
That'd be a super cool way to like skip church. But these days you probably wish you'd be there, right, with your friends and everything on Easter. So while we're at it, I guess I'll go ahead and share this with you too. There we go. That's a great way to stay socially distant.
Yeah. Get
you
your
know?
6 feet. Yep.
So, yeah, I'm always thinking, I think it's important to think 3 generations into the future. And looking back 3 generations, you can see what our grandparents did in the Great Depression, and who did they become? What kind of principles did they have? What sort of things did they stand for? I don't just want to survive. I think at first I really loved some of these zombie shows because it sort of followed a group of people, and what kind of people were they, and what did they stand for, and who did they fight for, and what failings did they have. I think I stopped watching them maybe over time because it felt like it all just sort of lowered everything down to the lowest common denominator, and everyone was just sort of scraping for their next breath or their next meal. I don't want to just do that. I don't just want to make it through and survive, although I realize that sometimes that's all we can do. But, I think the human spirit is one that lifts higher than just the animal level of just survival. What do you think, Amanda?
Yeah, I think that was really well said. And like when I think about different like individual crises that I've went through, I can look back and think like, actually, this is the lesson I learned. This is the way it shaped my character, my, resolve, my stick-to-itiveness, my perseverance. And I've come to value perseverance because of what I've gone through in the past. And so like remembering like how I got through those things and how they shaped me can help me, I think through, well, this is a shaping and a growing opportunity as well.
That's so good. So, what kind of principles do you want to have, Amanda, at the end of all this? What kind of person does Amanda Neely want to be 10 years from now as a result of this crisis?
Yeah, and interesting that you used 10 years because I was just reading today how a lot of individuals and families, it took 10 years for them to recover from 2008, 2009, right? And they maybe just recovered within the past couple years. If that could be the horizon of actually getting through this crisis for a lot of people,
right?
Not just a few months or whatever. And so when I've got lots of goals for 20 years from now. And a lot of them, as I think about them, they involve becoming more vocal and more sharing of the information that I have. I'm an information hoarder.
Yeah.
I hate hoarding things, but I hoard information and to share that information with others. And so that's part of like, if I want to be a better sharer of information, better communicator, a better just giver of what I've collected, then I better start doing that now, especially things that could share and help people through this crisis as well. Like if I had a big hoard of food, I'd for sure be sharing it, or a big hoard of toilet paper.
Yeah.
Why not the same with the knowledge and the information that I have?
I love that, Amanda. I heard yesterday, or it was a few days ago, I heard a lady say, there's a Chinese proverb that says, my bread is found in the belly of my neighbor. And I think that's a great proverb for this crisis. My bread is found in the belly of my neighbor. And I think that's, again, it's a principle, right? It's hard to say that when you're hoarding toilet paper. Or hoarding bread for yourself. So you're so smart to think that way.
Yeah. How about you?
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about it. Like, I have a kind of a list of principles that I try to live by and try to think on over time. One of those principles is nothing is as important as I think it is while I'm thinking about it. Nothing is as important as I think it is while I'm thinking about it. And that's an important one to remember when you're freaking out, because it's easy to let anxiety lift up. And again, I want to be the kind of person who accepts that, the world that we're in and not just zips right by it. But at the same time, I want to make sure that I'm, having a good perspective that nothing is as important as I might think it is while I'm thinking about it. Again, we will make it through this. The question is, the kind of people we become afterwards, I think will matter for our grandchildren someday. So for me, that's one of the life lessons or principles I live by. Is it okay if I share a poem?
For sure.
That'd be fine. All right, I'm going to share my screen with you here.
Okay.
Sharing screen is easiest with 2 monitors. It says, all right, I'm going to just give it a shot here.
Okay. I turned off the thing at the bottom so we make sure we see it.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm going to do this. Okay, can you see that? Okay.
Almost. Okay, should be there.
All right,
If.
cool. If. That's all I wanted to write. That's a nice poem. It's actually a really famous poem. Maybe folks will have recognized this as we go through it. It says, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or be lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise, if you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those 2 impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to, broken, and stoop and build them up with worn out tools, if you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss, if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they're gone, and so hold on when there's nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on, if you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son, by Mr. Kipling. Good poem for these times. Remembering courage, remembering balance, remembering that nothing is as important as we think it is while we're thinking about it. So those are my thoughts in the kind of the overall big picture of things. Yeah, what do you think about that poem? Have you heard that one before?
Yeah, I came across that early in this crisis as well. Someone had shared it with me. Of course, the woman in me wants it to be, then you'll be a woman, my daughter, or
Yep.
then you'll be a human,
Yeah.
my child, or something like that.
Right.
The
Agree.
the one part that I'm like, that the safe, stable, secure financial future part of us is like, why would you ever bet everything on one toss, right? And so maybe I'm not a woman yet, right?
Well, I think you are. I think we both are chasing after something that's probably the poem is not the end all be all definition of it's not about gender, in my book. It's about learning to become the best version of yourself and reaching toward a larger aim.
Yeah.
I think my thought is, finding what those necessary risks are and taking them. And these are times where you might have to take every last dollar you have. It's like that parable from the Bible. It's the man who takes everything he saved and buys that pearl of great price. Can you imagine that kind of risk? What if it was a cubic zirconium, a fake pearl, basically, right? A fake piece of diamond or a fake pearl. It's very risky to put all your eggs in one basket like that. But I think, again, who do we want to be? Do we just want to cower and shrink back and hoard our cash, or do we want to find important ways to become more of who we already are? I think if we spend and risk wisely in these times, I'm not talking about the stock market. I'm not talking about financial vehicles here. I'm saying, how do you risk your love for your spouse? How do you risk being a parent right now? How do you risk being a friend? I had someone who went around to every house in their neighborhood and hung little goodie bags of like masks and gloves and hand sanitizer, and just said, we're with you, or things like that, to give some flesh and bones to this poem. I think we can find ways to be a man / woman / true full human in these distressing times.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a great question to ask, like, who do I want to be when this crisis is over? Like a more like truer version of who I am.
Yeah.
Right? It's
Yeah.
not like it probably won't be like a drastic 180 change, right? But
Right.
it'll be a truer version of who you already are. Like that love for your spouse might become 2x, right? Like
Right.
two times the love.
Yep.
Or the way that you relate with your children might be stronger, or the way how good of a cook you are, you'll be a great cook, or something
Yeah.
along those lines. And if you're already giving, you're probably going to become an even bigger giver.
Right. Amanda, I think if everyone, we always like to say we don't want to be average. We want to be awesome. So what is everyone doing right now? Look at how what the results are of that, and try to do something exactly opposite to that for at least 10 minutes a day, and see how it feels. If you've seen that clip from Seinfeld where George Costanza is fed up with how miserable his life is, and so he just does the exact opposite of everything normal George would do, and he ends up falling in love, having all these friends, making a bunch of money. He's very successful because he's anti-George, basically. And I just wonder, if everyone right now is thinking about their 401k statement, if everyone is thinking about what's going to happen to their job. I just got off the phone with someone who, works in an industry that's been incredibly hit in a negative way. He's going to lose, essentially all of his hours, maybe his job. Millions of people in that industry are being let go. So, at this recording right now, the latest statistic says that weekly jobless claims are now at 16 million people in this country, and it shows no sign of stopping right now. So everyone right now is saying to themselves, when am I getting my stimulus check? I heard yesterday a third of Americans aren't paying rent this month. Can you let that just sink in for a minute? People are moving to shorter and shorter time horizons. And when you're thinking about shorter and shorter time horizons, when you go from, hey, am I going on that vacation this summer, to how am I going to pay rent this month? That starts to do something to your psyche.
Mm-hmm.
Again, back to zombies. If the zombie is all about where your next meal is, and really it's about short-term thinking. Even, really, it's the fight or flight. And rightfully so. It's kept our ancestors alive for many, many generations. But I'd like to think different. I'd like to think not average in this moment. And so my question would be, what does 100 years look like from here? What are we doing, whether we're alive or not? What are we as a species? What are we as a people doing? And what happened as a result of this? Who did you become individually, and who did we all become as a human population? What could we be better as a result of this crisis? How can we think 100 years into the future, even just 10 minutes a day? What do you want your family to say about you in this crisis, from this crisis 100 years from now? Because this will be talked about 100 years from now.
Yeah. So I have a personal question for you, Mark. Is it okay if I ask you a personal question?
Yes.
Okay, because we're on Facebook, as well as YouTube. Yeah. So, what is the one thing that you do extreme 10 minutes a day that makes you awesome, not average? Or maybe more than one thing, but give us an example.
Yeah. Is it the same thing every day? I don't think so. And I think there's a really cool, is it Lewis Carroll who says, I try to, it's out of Alice in Wonderland. The Queen of Hearts says, I try to imagine 5 impossible things before breakfast. I think that's a cool quote. I guess what I try to do is I try to beat the sun up every day, and I try to get done more before the sun is up than most people get done all day long. And that's just trying to be weird. And that's a prerogative I have. Not everyone has to be an early bird to be weird here, to not be average. And I might change my routines later in life and whatever. But again, I think the thing that you might try doing 10 minutes a day is just trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes for a moment. and write a little journal entry about that person's experience. And that's something that kind of gets you out of your routine and sort of the rat race of our own minds. I also think that it's cool to write a little bit, at least every other day or so. So I put about an hour on the calendar every other day to just get some writing in. And that's been a lot of fun for me. I'm curious, Amanda, what about yourself? What ways do you sort of break out of the mold and think different about yourself and where life has you?
Yeah, I definitely, especially, so we just moved about a month ago and our new home is really comfy and cozy. And I could totally feel the temptation to break my morning routine, sleep in, all those kind of things. Our bedroom window faces west, right? So it doesn't get a lot of sunlight, all those things. And we had to figure out a new way to make sure like we're getting up before the sun is up. We're, doing the things in the morning that really give us life. So that then we can give the rest of the day and not feel empty or not as empty. So I resonate with that one. Probably the thing that also has been a really important thing for me during this crisis has been making sure I'm still time blocking. And on
cool.
Saturdays, going in on my calendar and blocking out like what is the one thing I want to accomplish each day and blocking out 2 hours to do it. Sometimes I get it done in less than 2 hours, then I get some free time and I do a little happy dance, but making sure I've got that time to accomplish the thing that's most important for me to keep moving forward during this time. I hope a lot of people are doing that and being awesome because it's definitely, it helps me a lot, not just get lost in my inbox or, that kind of thing, to do that one thing before anything else. And
do you know that one thing question? I mean, that in and of itself, asking yourself that one thing question puts you out of the average, in my opinion. Yeah. Can you tell us the one thing question, the focusing question?
For sure. Yeah. So it's what is the one thing that by doing it, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary? And I used to ask that each day, right? But what I've started doing is asking it on Saturday for each day of the next week. So then I know what my one things are for Monday through Saturday. I give myself a Sabbath, no one thing on Sundays.
Yeah, that's great.
So that's that's been super helpful to me. So it's not something I'm doing every day, like setting up my one thing. I do it once a week.
That's awesome. I think that's super, super helpful because again, it points you back toward the kind of person you want to be before the world throws its stuff in your lap for the day or the week. You're saying, well, what would it, and easier and unnecessary are just two ways you can ask the question. Maybe it's what's the one thing I could do today, or in your case, one thing I could do this week that would create the kind of life I want to have. Such that by doing it, it would create the kind of life I want to have, or it would make me a better spouse. You could end that question with many different, put me in a better spot in my job, make me a better parent, put more influence into the world in a positive way. You can really, again, it's about who do we want to be at the end of this. So that question is a great focusing question for times of crisis too. Yeah. I think if you could just say, hey, what's the one thing I could do in the midst of this financial and health crisis such that by doing it, I become the kind of person that I want my grandkids to talk well about? Just a great question maybe to ask. Yeah. Any other takeaways or moments of clarity in the midst of this crisis to help you think through who you want to be at the end of it all?
Well, so it was really interesting. One thing you mentioned today is that like we will be telling stories 100 years from now of things that happened. Yeah. And I was remembering, so my dad was born in 1928. And I heard stories about what his childhood was like, right? Growing up during the Great Depression. And the big thing that like I know I'll still be talking about in 10 years when it's 2030 and it's been 100 years since the Depression. Like he went out and like killed rabbits for food. And I know it's Easter weekend. We probably shouldn't say that. Yeah. But like they did what they had to survive and they had the tools and the know-how to do that, right? And like that's something I'm thinking about, like, what are the ways I can be creative and ingenuitive with the skills that I have so
Mhm.
that, for me, I'm not going to be killing any rabbits, right? That's not my thing. But
Yeah.
what's the thing,
Yeah.
that um, I'd want 100 years from now for my grandkids to be talking about? I love that question. That's a great way to like rephrase this. Who do I want to be when this crisis is over?
And I would say I love it. And if I can, let me share another quote. If we've got the minutes for it.
Sure.
So we've got I've been collecting some quotes that seem to be relevant to our situation right now. And have you ever read the book The Alchemist?
Love that book. Great
Have
book.
you? Yeah, I haven't read it. I need to go back and read. I read it about 4 or 5 months ago. Didn't think it would be so relevant now. But one of the best things that I read in that book was this quote here, and I just had to stop the Audible and had to write it down word for word. So I hope I didn't have any typos here. But here's the quote: "My heart is afraid it will have to suffer," the boy told the alchemist under the moonlit sky. "Tell your heart the fear of suffering is worse than the suffering itself, and that no heart has suffered when it goes in search of its dreams, because every second of the search is a second's encounter with God." I think that's a great quote because it's a reminder that not everything is as important as we think it is while we're thinking about it.
Yeah.
That pain, even if you're having a health crisis right now, even if you've been infected by the virus, and my concerns and my prayers are within each and every person who has been impacted. But if we only look at the wound or the damage that it's causing our bodies, we've lost it. There's something bigger, something bolder. And if you can continue to be in search of your dreams, every moment of suffering on that path is a second's encounter with God. It's a great book by Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Hard book to read, but really powerful book to just remember that it's in the midst of suffering that you can find true meaning. So any thoughts about that quote? Well, I just pulled it away. I can put it back up if you want. But
you're good.
Yeah.
I want to go back and read The Alchemist right now. The whole idea of knowing your life's purpose, right? If I hadn't read that book and had that sense of meaning and purpose to my life, I know this crisis would be a lot harder. So that makes me think, if someone doesn't know that, that's what I would want for them. That's what I would pray for them, that they get a better sense of their purpose and destiny as they go through this crisis.
Love it. Well, so as we wrap up our conversation here, who do you want to? Why? Let me ask this question rather than a who. Let's ask. I think you had a why question. Why is this an important question to ask? Maybe ask that question because I'm not sure how you worded it, and I liked how you said it beforehand.
Oh, I don't remember. I mean, you kind of answered it though at the top of the live here. That like if we're just struggling to survive, like who do we think we are to be asking? Who do I want to be when this crisis is over? Right
on. Yeah. Why do you think that's an important question? I'll let you answer it now.
Well, I liked what you said about like, if we know we're going to survive, right, then that it gives us a chance to grow. And the whole zombie thing, that the zombie movies aren't really about the zombies. It's about who we are. It's kind of like this crisis isn't really about a virus. It's about who we are and who we will become. And, there's all those things, what the opportunities to change, right? When life is normal, it's harder to change, right? To get that courage and that motivation. But I think when things are out of the ordinary, for good or for bad, that's when we see opportunities. That's when we see ways that we can make shifts and adjust accordingly. And so I think it's actually probably easier to do self-improvement or, that kind of thing when you are in the midst of a crisis, because you see what you're lacking.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's smart. It's hard when you get kind of stuck in the rat race to sort of notice the maze a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's when we're lifted above or taken below that we can hopefully find new pathways, if we're willing to do that.
Right.
Some of us are just wishing for the good old days back in February, and those days aren't coming back. I think we have a new normal that might last for the rest of time. I don't know. We shall see. At least many officials say on a health basis, it might even be a year before everything goes to normal again. So again, how can you love those closest to you? How can you make smart financial decisions? You can continually find the kind of person you want to be by, again, not making this bigger than it needs to be. And I would maybe say the best 10 minutes you could spend is 10 less minutes freaking out about what the news is telling us.
Yeah.
Because again, their job is to keep us focused this moment, to keep our fear and attention right there. And we need to keep our eyes on the latest news and updates. But do we find ourselves, would we want our grandkids to say, wow, grandma and grandpa, man, they spent so much time reading the news in the midst of this whole crisis. And that was just, that's not the kind of legacy I guess I want to live. Don't want to be average. So well, Amanda, this has been a lot of fun. Any final words of wisdom from grandma or yourself, either one?
Well, I think if you only joined part of this or you're here at the end, go back, rewatch everything, especially the beginning when Mark drops some really cool, valuable insights about zombies. And
always important.
Yes. And I guess the final thing would be, you and I are teaming up to do a live show that people can jump in on the 25th of April. Maybe, I know Brandon's watching, he could pop that link into the comments here. Basically asking the question, how do we recession proof our money? Or how do we virus proof our money? I'm really excited to talk about that with you. Yeah.
I think that, again, we have the opportunity to have a re-evaluation of our finances. Do we want our money doing what it's always done up till now? And we've met a lot of our clients making smart decisions to reevaluate the new normal that they're in now. Just because you've done it before doesn't mean it still makes sense to do it now. So on a financial basis, just like everything else, who do you want to be when this crisis is over? Do you want to be stuck on the paycheck to paycheck cycle that you were in before this crisis started? Unfortunately, too many Americans were, which is why there's a stimulus check going out to everybody right now, right?
Yep.
So that's great. And when is that again? That's Saturday, April 25th at 10 a.m. Central Time. Saturday, April 25th, Central Time, 10 a.m. That's 11 a.m. for people who like to get up earlier on the East Coast. Okay. Thank you, Brandon. You put it in the comments. Awesome.
Yep.
Yeah. Change your life with some new thinking and new perspectives.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say there. And I'm going to do some of my research to bring some good analogies like zombies to that one too.
All right. Right on. Yeah. If it's maybe we'll be maybe we'll get onto some better movie genres and won't have to worry about horror movies. Maybe it'll be a rom-com or something else super fun.
Yeah, I love those historical dramas. So maybe I'll try to tie it into like Downton Abbey or something like that.
Rock and roll. All right. Yeah. This if the next virus makes us bring up Downton Abbey, I think it'll be a little easier for us to stomach. So.
Yep, for sure.
All right. Thank you.
That'd be a good marathon to do right now.
Yeah. Do Downton Abbey, then take a break next Saturday, April 25th at 10 a.m. Central.
Thanks, Mark.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for letting me hop on the live here.
Yeah. Thanks.
Go Grandma.
Yeah.